Good morning, everybody, and welcome back after your spring break. Hope you all had a wonderful time. We are going to be jumping into summertime with Farmer Boy, or it already has been because we had the 4th of July chapter last time. So we are going to hear about the Wilders' different chores that they have in the summer. Might be pretty different than what you have in your summertime. So let's begin reading. Summertime. The sunshine was hotter now, and all the green things grew quickly. The corn thrust its rustling narrow leaves waist high. Father plowed it again, and Royal and Almanzo hoed it again. Then the corn was laid by. It had gained so much advantage against the weeds that it could hold the field with no more help. Remember fighting off the weeds? Now it doesn't need the help of Almanzo and the Wilders. The bushy rows of potatoes almost touched, and their white blossoms were like foam on the field. The oats rippled gray-green, and the wheat's thin heads were rough with young husks where the kernels would grow. The meadows were rosy purple with the blossoms that the bees loved best. Work was not so pressing now. Almanzo had time to weed the garden and to hoe the row of potato plants he was raising from seed. He had planted a few potato seeds just to see what they would do, and every morning he fed his pumpkin that he was growing for the county fair. So has any of you been to a county fair before? So if you have been to a county fair, you know there's certain fair rides and things to eat, but there's also categories for the best animals and for the best vegetables and things that you cook. So he's got a pumpkin that he's going to bring to the county fair. Father had shown him how to raise a milk-fed pumpkin. Now they had picked out the best vine in the field and snipped off all the branches but one, and all the young yellow pumpkin blossoms but one. Then, between the root and the wee green pumpkin, they carefully made a little slit on the underside of the vine. Under the slit, Almanzo made a hollow in the ground and set a bowl of milk in it. Then he put a candle wick in the milk, and the end of the candle wick he put carefully into the slit. So there's the pumpkin, and the vine coming off the pumpkin is actually how it's going to get the water, but instead of getting water, it's getting milk. What do you think that's going to do to the pumpkin? And there's candle wick in the milk. Not sure about that. Now, every day the pumpkin vine drank up the bowl full of milk through the candle wick. It's through the candle wick that it's able to get it. And the pumpkin was actually really growing enormously. Already, it was 3 times as big as any other pumpkin in the field. Almanzo also had his little pig now. He bought her with his $50. That was a really good choice for him. Do you remember that? He got a $50 from his dad, and instead of buying 5 cents of lemonade, he's saying, I'm going to save it up and actually make some money off of this pig. And she was so small that he fed her at first with just a little rag dipped in milk. But she soon learned to drink on her own. He kept her in a pen in the shade because young pigs grow best in the shade. And he fed her all she could eat. She was growing fast, too. So was Almanzo, but he was not growing fast enough. He drank all the milk he could hold, and at mealtimes, he filled his plate so full he could not eat it all. Father looked stern because he left food on his plate. Do any of your parents do that? If you have food left on your plate, they say you've got to finish it. He asked, what's the matter, son? Are your eyes bigger than your stomach? That means it looks like you're imagining that you're hungrier than you truly are. Then, and that happens a lot if it's especially like yummy food that you're seeing. Then Almanzo tried to swallow a little more. He did not tell anyone he was trying to grow up faster so he could help break the colts. Aw, he still wants one so badly. Now, every day, Father took the 2-year-olds out, one by one on a long rope, and trained them to start and to stop when he spoke. He trained them to wear bridles and harness and not to be afraid of anything. Pretty soon, he would hitch each one up with a gentle old horse and teach it to pull a light cart behind it without being scared. But he wouldn't let Almanzo even go into the barnyard while he was training them. So he is allowing Almanzo to help out a little bit more in some ways, but can't go into the barnyard if the young horses are being trained. Almanzo was sure he wouldn't frighten them. He wouldn't teach them to jump or balk or try to run away, but Father wouldn't trust a 9-year-old. Now that year, Beauty had the prettiest colt Almanzo had ever seen. He had a perfect white star on his forehead, just like Black Beauty. And Almanzo named him Starlight. He ran in the pasture with his mother, and once when Father was in town, Almanzo went into the pasture. Beauty lifted her head and watched him coming, and the little colt ran behind her. Almanzo stopped and stood perfectly still. After a while, Starlight peeked at him under Beauty's neck. Almanzo didn't move. Little by little, the colt stretched its neck toward Almanzo, looking at him with wondering wide eyes. Beauty nuzzled his back and switched her tail. Then she took a step and bit off a clump of grass. Starlight stood trembling, looking at Almanzo. Beauty watched them both, chewing placidly. The colt made one step, then another. He was so near that Almanzo could almost have touched him, but he didn't. He didn't move. Starlight came another step nearer. Almanzo didn't even breathe. Suddenly, the colt turned and ran back to his mother. Almanzo heard Eliza Jane calling, "Oh, Monzo!" She had seen him. She knows that he is not supposed to be anywhere near the colts. That night, she told Father, "Oh, tattletale." Almanzo said he hadn't done a thing. Honest, he hadn't. Which is true, but he was tempted to. But Father said, "Let me catch you fooling with that colt again, and I'll tan your jacket." I think he's going to give him a spanking. That's too good a colt to be spoiled. I won't have you teaching it tricks that I'll have to train out of it. Now, the summer days were long and hot now, and Mother said this was good growing weather. But Almanzo felt that everything was growing but him. Day after day went by, and nothing seemed to change. Almanzo weeded and hoed the garden. He helped mend the stone fences. He chopped wood and did the chores. In the hot afternoons, when there wasn't much to do, he went swimming. Sometimes he woke in the morning and heard rain drumming on the roof. That meant he and Father might go fishing. He didn't dare speak to Father about fishing because it was wrong to waste time in idleness. It was like in laziness and things that are not going to be productive. Even on rainy days, there was plenty to do. Father might mend some harnesses for the horses, or sharpen his tools, or shave shingles. We saw that early on in the book. Silently, Almanzo ate breakfast, knowing that Father was struggling against temptation. He was afraid Father's conscience would win. "Well, what are you going to do today?" Mother would say. Father might answer slowly, "Well, I did lay out to cultivate the carrots and mend the fence." "You can't do that in this rain," she said. "No," Father would say. After breakfast, he would stand looking at the falling rain till at last he would say, "Well, it's too wet to work outdoors. What say we go fishing, Almanzo?" Then Almanzo ran to get the hoe and bait can, and he dug worms for bait. The rain drummed on his old straw hat. It ran down his arms and back, and the mud squeezed cool between his toes. He was already sopping wet when he and Father took their rods and went down across the pasture to Trout River. Nothing ever smelled so good as the rain on clover. Nothing ever felt so good as raindrops on Almanzo's face, and the wet grass swishing around his legs. Nothing ever sounded so pleasant as the drops pattering on the bushes along Trout River, and the rush of water over the rocks. They stole quietly along the bank, not making a sound, and they dropped their hooks into the pool. Father stood under a hemlock tree and Almanzo sat under a tent of cedar boughs and watched the raindrops dimpling the water. Suddenly, he saw silver flash in the air. Father had hooked a trout. So I don't know if any of you have ever gone fishing before, but it is a very long time of waiting before anything ever happens. So it was a lot of excitement when he actually caught a trout. It slithered, and that's a type of fish, by the way. It slithered and gleamed through the falling rain as Father flipped it to the grassy bank. Almanzo jumped up and remembered just in time not to shout. Then he felt a tug at his line. The tip of his rod bent almost to the water, and he jerked it upward with all his might. A shimmering big fish came up on the end of his line. It struggled and slipped in his hands, but he got it off the hook. A beautiful speckled trout, even larger than Father's. He held it up for Father to see. Then he baited his hook and flung out his line again. Fish always bite well when raindrops are falling on the river. So that's a good reason to go out fishing. Father got another one, then Almanzo got two. Then Father pulled out two more, and Almanzo got another one even bigger than the first. It's not as good as the Newfoundland fishing, but still very good. In no time at all, they had 2 strings of good trout. Father admired Almanzo's, and Almanzo admired Father's. And they tripped home through the clover in the rain. They were so wet they couldn't even get wetter, couldn't be any wetter, and their skins were glowing warm. Out in the rain, by the chopping block at the woodpile, they cut off the heads of the fish and they scraped off the silvery scales. And they cut the fish open and stripped out their insides. I know that probably sounds like very gross work, and I would be a little grossed out by it, but that's that's how we're able to eat fish. And they use everything they can get. Now, the big milk pan was full of trout, and Mother dipped them in cornmeal and fried them for dinner. Now, this afternoon, Almanzo can help me churn, said Mother. Now, the cows were giving so much milk that churning must be done twice a week. Mother and the girls were tired of churning, and on rainy days, they had Almanzo to do it. Here is Almanzo churning the milk. By the way, I told you guys the story about my grandmother whose parents were dairy farmers and that they churned it too much. They left it churning all night long and it became whipped cream. I got the exact amount. It was a full milk room that they kept it in, and it was 400 gallons about. Oh my goodness. So that's what happens if you have it churned too long. Now, in the whitewash cellar, the big wooden barrel churn stood on its wooden legs, half full of cream. Almanzo turned the handle, and the churn started rocking like a rocking horse or a rocking chair. Inside it, the cream went chug, splash, chug, splash. Almanzo had to keep rocking the churn till the chugging broke the cream into grains of butter swimming in buttermilk. So they're making some butter out of it. Then Almanzo drank a mug of acid creamy buttermilk and ate cookies, while Mother skimmed out the grainy butter and washed it in the round wooden butter bowl. She washed every bit of buttermilk out of it. Then she salted it and packed the firm golden butter in her butter tubs. Fishing wasn't the only summer fun. Some July evening, Father would say, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Tomorrow we'll go berrying." That's a phrase, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, meaning you can't just work all the time. It is good for someone like Almanzo to have hard work and be part of the family and help them out, but kids need time that's played as well. That's why, like at school, we have recess time, and hopefully at home, you work in some playtime as well. It's important to have a balance. It's good for grown-ups too. So they're going to go berrying. What do you think that means? It looks like this. Berrying. Yeah, maybe getting some berries. Almanzo didn't say anything, but inside he was all one joyful yell. We know that he likes getting the berries. We've seen that before. Now, before dawn next day, they were all riding away in the lumber wagon, wearing their oldest clothes and taking pails and bushel baskets and a big picnic lunch. They drove far into the mountains near Lake Chateauguay, where the wild huckleberries and blueberries grew. The woods were full of other wagons and other families berrying. They laughed and sang, and all among the trees you could hear their talking. Every year they all met friends there. Then they didn't see that they didn't see at any other time. So it's just once a year you go out and see some friends. But all of them were busily picking berries. They talked while they worked. The leafy low bushes covered the ground in open spaces among the trees. Blue blackberries clustered thickly under the leaves, and there was a syrupy smell in the hot, still sunshine. Birds had come to feast in the berry patches. The air was aflutter with wings, and angry blue jays flew scolding at the heads of the pickers. They're like, "You're stealing my food." Once, 2 blue jays attacked Alice's little sunbonnet, and Almanzo had to beat them off. And once he was picked by himself, and behind a cedar tree, he met a black bear. Oh my goodness, what would you do? Now the bear was standing on its hind legs, stuffing berries into his mouth with both furry paws. Almanzo stood stock still, and so did the bear. They're both afraid of each other, I think. Almanzo stared, and the bear stared right back at him with little scared eyes above his motionless paws. Then the bear dropped on all fours and ran waddling away into the woods. At noon, the picnic baskets were opened by a spring, and all around in the cool shade, people ate and talked. Then they drank at the spring and went back to the berry patches. Early in the afternoon, the bushel baskets and all the pails were full, and Father drove home. They were all a little sleepy, soaked in sunshine and breathing the fruity smell of berries. For days, Mother and the girls made jellies and jams and preserves, and for every meal, there was a huckleberry pie or blueberry pudding. Oh, sorry, I'm running low on battery. I'm going to plug this in. Then, one evening at supper, Father said, "It's time Mother and I had a vacation. We're thinking of spending a week at Uncle Andrew's. Can you children take care of things and behave yourselves while we're gone? I'm sure Eliza Jane and Royal can look after the place for a week," Mother said. Remember, Eliza Jane and Royal, they're like teenager age, but they're going to watch over for a whole week their younger siblings? With Alice and Almanzo to help them. Almanzo looked at Alice, and then they both looked at Eliza Jane. Then they all looked at Father and said, "Yes, Father." So that's where we're going to leave off. Can you imagine just staying at home for a week with your siblings, taking care of all of the farm work by yourselves? Now, Royal and Eliza Jane are definitely older siblings who maybe could watch for a little while, but I don't think we would have that where a full week would pass by with just older siblings watching over. But we're going to see that in the next chapter, which I think you're really going to like. For those of you who've read ahead, I know this is some of you, this is your favorite chapter, or it's maybe tied up there with the one about Mr. Corse in the school. So I really like this one too. I hope you'll enjoy it. That is all for today. I will talk to you all soon. Have a wonderful Monday, first day back, and I will see you later. Bye.